that people face in their life as they try to come deeper into awareness, which is a prerequisite to coming deeper into intimacy and closeness in any relationship, whether it's dominant, submissive, or not, is this challenge of the head, this constant overthinking that so many people find themselves plagued by. And I know some people realize that they have an overthinking problem, and others maybe don't even recognize that it's going on. But coming to some kind of resolution around this being stuck in our heads has been really necessary for us in this relationship, for both of us to find more of a sense of presence. And I'd like to start today just talking a little bit about overthinking from your perspective and how that used to feel, I guess, starting there. What used to go on inside of your head when you were more stuck up in there?
Well, I think I was one of those who didn't even know what was going on. I was, I've said this before, I was in a survival mode. It was a reactionary way to live life, but also just focused on being responsible. And so I don't even know if I could tell you what that used to be like for me. But there was at some point along the personal development journey where the idea of like getting reactionary and getting triggered really stood out to me. And I noticed some of that in myself, but it was more in a suppression way than um, fight kind of thing. And so I think that's what kind of brought my awareness to paying attention to the constant meaning making of things, the constant looking for perfection, the constant, what I now can see was the constant looking for the ways that I was trying to control life to give me the best possible outcome of this idea of perfection.
You said the word reactionary. How was it, obviously in retrospect, hindsight being 2020, how do you see that as being a reactionary way of living?
Well, I was not aware of my emotional experience that we all have, but I was very unaware of the idea of experience something, experience an emotional response to it, and either feel it or stuff it. And I was a stuffer. So when I say reaction, it's not like, rah, like fight necessarily. Um, but there was that emotional response. And when I was living in a very unaware state and I was suppressing so much, like I was just validating this part of myself that was thinking, the ego, thinking that I could control life and then supporting all these belief systems that, again, I didn't even know was there, were there.
And that's really what overthinking, how it manifests itself, is in this. constant attentiveness, and I think we've used the words hypervigilance because there is this reactivity to being so tuned in to trying to make sure that nothing goes wrong, that everything goes right, as if we know what right is.
Comfortable is a good word there.
Right. Well, what we think is right is really just what keeps us from feeling discomfort.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, on my side of this, where a lot of overthinking really used to get me was the trying to apply logical solutions to problems.
Typical. um,
Typical man.
yeah, I was going to say typical problem that men have to overcome.
And some problems do have logical solutions.
Right.
The battery died in our vehicle. So yesterday I went to the store, bought a new battery, and put the battery in. That's a logical problem with a logical solution. Where, but we don't overthink those. There's no questions other than maybe where do I buy the battery or how do I find make sure I find the right size. Where the problems come in is where we're trying to apply a logical solution to an emotional problem
Big time.
because we are trying to use a screwdriver to pound in a nail. We're using the wrong tool. So this is where overthinking really became a problem for me in the past, was when things weren't going well in the way that I wanted them to go, especially in our relationship. It was this, well, if we just did it like this, then everything would be better. And I would try and try and try to think of how to get the message across, how to say it in the right way so you would understand and do the thing that I knew that if you just did, then everything would be better.
And I responded to you with an unconscious, like the same statement there. If you would just consider all these things and do it like this way, it would be better. And I was trying to be like, I surrender, but the internal experience wasn't aligning.
Right. So essentially, what we're both doing there is I'm spinning around in my head trying to get you to do it my way, and you're spinning around in your head trying to get me to do it your way.
Hmm.
And we're both frustrated with each other because we don't feel heard, we don't feel seen, because we're both trying to come up with logical solutions to problems that aren't logical.
Right.
And first of all, in that scenario, we are both essentially trying to do the same thing, which anytime you have, like, this is just polarity 101. Anytime you're in a relationship where you have two people trying to be the same, what you're going to end up with is one of two things: conflict or shutdown.
And no spark.
No spark. Like, this is where dead bedrooms come from, is you have two people trying to be the same, and you end up with just no, like, there's no give and receive.
It's boring.
It is. So the the flip side to that has really been, first of all, recognizing, becoming aware of the fact that we both spent so much time up here. Before I go there, though, what does it what did it feel like when especially when I used to really be deeper into this tendency to be feeling something and have me trying to fix it, to give you a logical solution.
Well, again, there was so much unconscious patterns, and so it's hard to speak exactly to what the experience was. But I remember not feeling heard or understood. But also, part of that was just my ego trying to create this comfort.
And overthinking isn't made any better by the, just call it the disembodied world that we live in.
No,
Because the one thing that I know that anyone who finds themselves stuck in overthinking, if they realize that that's an issue and they're trying to make it better, what's the one thing that most of those people do to try to make it better?
think more.
Think more, gather more knowledge. I need to learn something. I need to understand the problem.
Yeah. Like for me, this also played out in other relationships,
For sure.
in people pleasing, because that is constantly trying to gauge what other people are feeling. And so I want them to feel okay in order that I feel okay. So there's a lot of overthinking there as well. And I did this with my own kids, trying to create comfort for them while I created some discomfort for myself. But there was definitely some codependent ego soothing that would go on there as well.
It also plays out when we have problems or perceived problems. And this is one of the places that, this is my own personal belief, that talk therapy actually makes people's problems worse
Yeah, I can see how that would be true. Could be true.
because we're trying to think our way through problems that are only there because we are so stuck in our thinking.
Exactly.
And we run across this so much where people have their fears, their challenges, their struggles that they're going through in their lives, and they will talk incessantly about those problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never once seen those problems get better by someone obsessively ruminating on them and talking about them.
No.
So what, because I've watched you, I've observed you and witnessed you go from a place where I saw you like just constantly in this kind of fear-based, heady, unconscious state to a place now where I really do witness you feeling your way through life.
Absolutely. I feel so different. And I can't even put the appropriate words to the contrast of what the experience is, but I can try if you want to go there now.
Yeah, please.
You know, what I still catch myself. I think I just did this before we started the podcast, actually. And I'm not even remembering what I just did that on. But instead of trying to ask you questions, like let's say you made a decision, once in a while I will have some reflection
Mhm.
or a question, but I don't have the 100 questions running in the background while only maybe asking four of them in a way of trying to figure out, did you actually make the same decision I would, or did you consider everything that I would? Now I'm like, I don't want to know all of that. It's like overwhelming for me to take in a lot of that information. And the trust and respect that I feel in your decision making, like, I know you consider everything that you possibly can about me and our life experience together, without a doubt. Might you not think of something I did? Sure, but I don't care. And that's honestly how I could maybe summarize it. I just don't care unconsciously like I used to.
This is one of the things where this goes hand in hand when two people do this in relationship with each other. Because one of the things I've noticed that's really helped me get out of worry and fear and thinking too much about problems and making mistakes is how much I used to have to or feel as though I had to never ever fuck up because of how I felt like that was going to impact our relationship and piss you off. And so I would way over obsess about not making a mistake because of how I at one point knew you would react if I made a mistake. But then even after you started to calm down in that, there's still a piece of it that had to drop in me and my system because I programmed myself to be afraid of your reactions.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I don't know if this actually happened, but this idea just came to my mind of, rewind us, I don't know how many years, a lot. And let's say you forgot to put out the garbage can. And I look outside and the garbage truck is there. Oh no, we went a week without the garbage getting picked up. Something in my system would kind of feel like the world was ending. Like, that was not okay. What are we going to do? The garbage is going to overflow. It's going to stink the garage up. Oh my gosh, the world is ending. Like, that's what my system would feel like, even if I wasn't even able to articulate all of what was going on. So, how would I show up to you? Probably avoidant, like shut down somewhat. I would feel like I didn't want to give you affection. I didn't probably want to talk to you. And, maybe I'm overreacting a little bit here
You're
about
not.
the garbage. Okay. Thank you for your honesty.
But that's about how it would have went.
Yeah. And like, it's so, knowing what I know now, it's so crazy to think back and be like, oh my gosh, that was me. That was how I showed up in this relationship where I was like, it's good. I love you. You love me. Life is great.
And my knowing how you would react to something that could be a very simple oversight, right? I could have forgotten what day of the week it was, or just been really overwhelmed with a lot of other stuff, or maybe really stuck in my head spinning around trying not to make mistakes to upset you and something else, and just forget that it's the night that the garbage can needs to go out. And then, then I'm trying so hard to avoid the discomfort of you being upset with me that now you're experiencing a version of me that's this fearful, like I'm acting like I'm afraid of you because I was afraid of you.
Hmm.
And I don't think any woman would find a guy who's afraid of her to be sexy or dominant or probably even attractive.
No, but you would also then be the one to try to um, amend what was going on, amend the disconnection. And I wouldn't always want to talk
Right.
if there wasn't some issue to talk about that I was actually aware of when I was actually stuffing.
So this brings up an interesting little detour that ties into the whole overthinking thing. This is when people talk about attachment styles.
Hmm.
This is was our anxious avoidant attachment. Something would happen, you'd shut down, I'd pursue you to try to bring us back into connection, and then my over um, over exuberant attempts to bring us back into connection would push you farther away in a lot of cases until you either cracked or I gave up.
Yep, absolutely.
And this is where the I think the whole attachment style thing is it's valuable in helping to see that pattern, but it's not a solution because the way that we're showing up there in that anxious avoidant thing, I'm anxious because I'm afraid of losing connection with you.
Hmm.
I need connection. You are pulling it away from me. You're shutting down because you're afraid and something went wrong and there's a problem and you don't know how to handle it. So, this anxious avoidant thing that we do is a symptom, it's not the problem. And I think a lot of people go after this anxious avoidant attachment style thing as a solution. Like if I fix my anxious attachment and you fix your avoidant attachment, then we will have secure attachment. Not unless you deal with the reasons why I'm afraid to upset you, and you deal with the reasons why you are afraid of anything going wrong.
Yeah, that's where like labeling things, as long as you stay out of like, oh, this is just how I am, uh, and think like that's just what I have to live with. No, actually, you're still putting yourself in your own prison
Mhm.
by just accepting a label of that and getting underneath to the root issues is how we've created the freedom from that.
So, what are some of the ways that you inadvertently made this problem worse for yourself in the seeking information and trying to understand the problem so you could fix it?
Oh, once I actually started using an Instagram account, because I didn't for a long time. I don't even remember why I started using it. But then when I was on this personal development path, I was all about anything relationships, anything emotional healing, anything fitness, anything nutrition. I mean, gosh, we all know that we could probably spend a whole day consuming information online. Um, and I used to do this through Facebook too, but I gave that up a while ago. Um, and then Instagram came around, just a different method. um,
We've never gotten into TikTok, but that's an even seems like an even more addictive.
yeah, I don't feel like I'm old, but I really don't feel like I identify with this whole like social media craze of Snapchat and TikTok and all of it's just like I don't want it. I don't even want to have my face on my phone all the time. I don't enjoy that.
It's really interesting that we make our living being on social media on a podcast, but we also don't consume social media.
Right.
It's how we share this message. It's how we share our love. It's how we share what it is that the ways we're trying to make an impact on the world, but we don't consume it.
Well, I'm not saying there's not valuable information. I know I've learned a lot of valuable information. I also took in a lot of information that only created more mental fuckery. And it created more dissonance in my system. It created more fear. I don't know if that's the right word, created, but I like was feeling more afraid of making the wrong decision.
You became more afraid as the all of the different things you absorbed as being the right way to do it started to come into conflict with each other. And then you had fear because you were always doing, when you have 1,000 ways to do something right, you're always doing something wrong. And
Exactly. That's that perfectionist seeking mindset. And yes, I had some big time contradictory things going through my mind, whether it was like from my past and then now, but also like, well, this person is talking about it this way. Well, this person is talking about it that way. And there was this underlying belief in me until I saw it. You called it out even more, even though you pointed this out at the very beginning of asking me to be your submissive, is this assuming that if someone else was stating something on the internet and they presented themselves with this certain level of confidence, there was this assumptiveness in me that it was 100% true fact. But then I got to a point where I'm like, okay, something isn't right here because this can't be true and that true for everybody across the board all the time, no matter what. Like I started seeing things like that. And then like, I relationships, the polarity, the masculine, the feminine, and starting to feel responses in my as I connected with my body, I started to feel responses in my body of like, this doesn't feel right. But I never, not never, most of the time, I couldn't even articulate why. And then I got to a point where I was ignoring my intuition for a while. And it was like, you need to pull back from ingesting information. And I remember kind of thinking, like, no, I don't need to do that. If it's important, you would tell me. And I know you saw all of this going on. Like, I will give you all of that credit. It wasn't like you were oblivious. You knew, but you also knew that allowing me to come to certain conclusions was what I needed. And then eventually I got to a point where maybe I've even shared this before, I don't even know. Um, I couldn't ignore my intuition anymore. It was blaring me in the face, and I was feeling it in my body like, stop now, no more, you're done. And I remember losing my shit, just crying to you. I felt humiliation for how I was acting. I was just embarrassed at the beginning of feeling like I can't ingest this information because here's a label. Going back to the strengths finder that we took so long ago, it was like one of my strengths was input. I'm so good at getting all the information, and I, sure, some of that still can be a strength when it feels good to me. Um, but I felt all of this overwhelm all at once, and I just remember telling you, like, I have to give this up. And I was devastated, honestly. I felt like there was something wrong with me because I didn't want that to be true.
and I had pointed out to you, like, it wasn't that I hadn't dropped hints that you were overdoing the consumption of information.
You did. I ignored.
But this was a place where my leadership of you had to be more than just forcefulness.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you were still very much in a place of unwinding people pleasing patterns. You were in the perfectionist. It was very easy for me to push you into performativeness if I was too authoritative, because you would follow, but without any connection to your own system in why you would follow. So even though I saw that you were essentially mind fucking yourself with all of this information, if I had just said, I am Dom, you are sub, you are going to stop, you would have stopped, but it wouldn't have made the problem better.
No, I probably at that time would have looked like you're taking something away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have felt like a scarcity something or another.
Mm-hmm.
Like I probably would have been really mad at you and feeling like I don't know even what to say about that.
So I want to talk a little bit about how we've come, both in our own ways, out of this overthinking by talking a little bit more generally about the difference between being in the head and being in the body. Because there are a lot of people who spill a lot of words and make a lot of word salads on the internet about embodiment, about being in the body, about, the embodiment practices. But without much of a felt sense experience of being able to connect to what it actually means to fucking live that way, to actually be able to get out of overthinking for good. And, one phrase, I would love to hear you describe your experience of what this is. This phrase you hear a lot is drop into the body, which is helpful. But what does dropping into the body mean to you? And how do you experience that?
Well, when I hear that phrase, I like there is a time and a place for it when someone is trying to catch all the ways slowly that you are living from the mind and not the body. And so there has to be intention about creating the space and finding the ways that you feel like you can do that. And so, one of the things that I've mentioned before and what I would use was guided meditations in order to feel, because feeling is being in your body. And I remember thinking, like, I've said this before, how do I do that? Like, I still don't even know if I can put words to how I live my life now from a feeling body. Like, I can't, there's no reason to overcomplicate it other than it's a felt intuitive sense.
This is the thing that makes most people uncomfortable with this idea of being in the body, is it's actually extremely simple.
It
It's
is.
not complicated.
No,
What's complicated is all of the thinking about how to do it. What do I do? What are the practices? How do I do this? How many times a day do I need to do this thing where I put my hand to my heart and my hand to, and to be able to say that I live in my body? Like, all of the thinking about it is what's complicated. What it really takes to get out of your head and to stop overthinking is to tune into the sensation and the feeling in your body, to listen to it, to find the places where you feel tension or discomfort, and bring your attention to that tension, and then just be willing to listen to what your body has to say to you. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to make any sense of it. You don't even have to try. But a practice can just be more thinking. It can just be more forceful doing. Because the idea behind all of this is we really do need to get to a place as a human being where we don't leave our bodies, where we actually just stay in them, where it's not like I'm constantly having to come back out of my head, come out of my head, drop into my body, drop into my body.
That's what I was kind of getting at, was that language can make it sound like you're going back and forth
Mhm.
when truly, it does require you to go through what I'm going to label as emotional healing work. Like, that is part of the reason why you can't stay in your body, where you can't, well, I'm going to say you can't completely feel connected to your body. Like, I've had to do a lot of that.
This is where this whole thing, overthinking, dominance and submission, emotional healing work, all of these things come together because the book that kind of started this whole, the understanding of this, The Body Keeps the Score, laying out this concept for us that the physical body stores our traumatic experiences from the past. And it shows up in our pain, it shows up in our tension, it shows up in our disease, all of these ways that our physical body is manifesting the things from our past that it's stored. So as we try to come out of overthinking and connect to our bodies so we can be more present, if we want deeper intimacy in a relationship, if we want more connection and love in our power exchange, but we keep getting stuck up here, to your point, the reason we can't stay present and stay in our body and stay connected is because our bodies are so mucked up with all of this unhealed stuff from the past. And that's why we go to our heads. We're trying to think our way to a solution to a problem that isn't a thinking problem. It is a body problem that needs to be felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do want to make a side note that, because, at the beginning of my journey, I was like, what does that even look like? Like, I don't even know what that would be like. And it doesn't mean that my mind doesn't work. It doesn't mean that my mind might not all of a sudden like zone out a little bit here and there. But the difference for me is I just catch it and I like let it go. I don't sit there and ruminate or make these like judgments against myself of, oh my gosh, I'm doing that again, and going down this path of like degrading myself. um, it's just like, oh, I was like zoning out in fantasy for a little bit. Like, here I am. Like, that is still part of the human experience. It's not like I'm walking around with my hand on my heart and my hand on my womb, and I'm like feeling my way with my eyes closed, and I'm just in my feeling body. Like, it's not even that. Like, we're still human beings with what feels like just this new experience and awareness of life.
And this is one of the places that the mind, when we talk about the mind, what we're really talking about is this, the spinning thought, overthinking mind that's trying to solve all of the problems and keep everything safe,
Hmm.
right? This is one of the ways that that is so damn sneaky because you could hear us talking about this. You could be watching this podcast, you could be listening to it and thinking, Oh, I'm in my head too much. I need to get in my body more. I'm doing it wrong. Am I in my body enough? I need to be in my body. You're doing the same thing.
Exactly.
And that's why you can't make your healing your identity.
No, we've seen that.
We've been there. And the whole point of doing this healing work isn't so that you are really good at doing your healing work. It's you're not doing the work because doing the work is what you need to do. This is about setting yourself free to be who you were born to be.
And have the experience on this earth that you are worthy of.
This is about being free to live your authentic life. We talked recently about authenticity. We can never be free to live our authentic life, to be our authentic selves, when we are stuck in our heads, because everything authentic lives in the body. It lives in the present moment.
Yeah, one other big difference for me, um, that I can speak to now is the ability to experience something and feel something and not try to figure it all out, not try to constantly make meaning of it, make stories about it, have to know the answer of why, what is this? Because, for one, sometimes things happen and they matter, but they don't, right? Like, there's this peace that I experience now in the fact that everything will always work out. And if I am meant to know something, I will know it, whether it's through me or through you. And so I like my ability to flow through life, and maybe that sounds quirky and funny and whatever, but really, like, that's kind of another thing is like, oh, the feminine flow. It literally is just like this moving, this dancing with life in a way that, again, gives me this freedom of, I don't need to know. I don't need to know. And that feels so life-giving.
This is where this can become so incredibly performative. And you mentioned back when you consumed a lot more social media, how you just would have these feelings like something is just off here, something's not right.
Hmm.
I really believe that experience was you sensing the difference between someone who was trying to perform the act of something versus being that something.
Probably so.
Someone faking it with really solid graphic design skills and well rehearsed videos versus someone who's just being themselves.
Yeah, let's be real. Like, there's an assumptiveness to seeing a very professionally created Instagram post or video or whatever
Mhm.
that I had to catch myself being like, oh, it's so well done that it must be true and I must be wrong or doing life wrong or whatever, despite this, like, something about this just doesn't feel right. And that's my inner knowing.
And that's just the thing is every one of us has this innate wisdom in our bodies. We have this deep knowing and ability to tune into what it is that's right and real and true. The problem is so little in our world is right and real and true that we start to blame ourselves and think something's wrong with us because it feels like everything is fake. And, as you would be absorbing all of this information and feeling the way that you did, you would always find a way back to blaming yourself, figuring out a way that you must be wrong.
Yeah, that's what happened when I realized, like, oh, I have responsibility in everything. I erred on the side of, I must be wrong.
Mhm.
What's my ownership in this? And that was also then a new pattern that I had to break. Maybe it was a new old one. I don't know.
There's probably a whole episode there.
Yeah, well, this is also building that trust in my inner knowing. It's been a part of the process. And again, like when I feel something, just honestly, like if I'm reading something, it's like, oh, something isn't right here. Not sitting there and trying to figure out what is it and why and like trying to find other things to justify it. It's literally like, I'm going to let this be and stop
Yeah.
because this isn't for me, clearly. There's nothing here for me. It's a big difference.
And that's the difference between living in your body and trying to force yourself into your body just using practices or, whatever it is. This, the real solution to this always comes through coming when we come into our body and we recognize, oh, this is uncomfortable. How do we know that it's uncomfortable? Sometimes we can feel that it's uncomfortable. Something feels off, something feels wrong, this doesn't feel right. Sometimes we only know it happened because we went right back to our heads and started thinking and figuring out and planning and understanding and trying to gather more information. But we can come to a point by recognizing and learning to be present. And this is really the word that I wanted to get to is presence. Being able to be present in this moment, where I am, where I'm sitting, where is my energy, where's my attention? Is it inside of me or is it out there? Where am I in a place of ownership of where I am, like where my energy is? Keeping it inside of me, keeping it in this present moment is really the solution to this problem of overthinking. Because I have to be able to be here and be present to be attentive to those feelings, to those sensations, to that tension, to that pain, to be able to breathe into it and listen to it. And recognize when I have a tendency to dissociate or to drift or to jump into something other than presence.
So I have to bring up this part of the conversation because, in my experience, this was 100% necessary.
Okay.
And that was facing down my sexuality. Because the way I see it now, feel it now, experience it now, is our sexuality is our essence. And I didn't know how disconnected I was from that. And if that's our essence, that's our body,
It, well, it's the very basic of our body. It's what created
right?
our body.
It, to me, right. Like when I say that's our body, it's like this point that expands out from inside of us. And I would not be who I am today. Well, that sounds a funny way to say it, without integrating my sexuality in my fullness in all of life. And I mean, this is expression, this is receptivity, this is the feeling body. It's all of it. And so for me, this presence has only been able to feel expansive and real by, oh man, that's a whole nother topic of like going through all of the sexuality work, unlearning, learning, healing, all of that, what was real for me in my life experience up until that point.
Yeah. And what I've witnessed in you in that has been this the challenge of coming to a place of acceptance of who you are as a sexual being, of what turns you on, what excites you, what you actually like, all of these things that you pushed down or shamed or avoided in your body.
Hmm.
You tried to think your way to a sexuality that aligned with what you believed and conceived of to be acceptable.
And I resisted it for a long time. I tried to do everything but face down my sexuality. And to some hearing that, they're probably like, I love sex, or I have no problem with sex. I think we all have um, aspects that we keep in the shadow, that we judge, shame, you know, approaching it with black and white thinking. Like, there's just a lot of, um, I'm just going to call it work you can do around it to just challenge yourself and feel expansive in it, because I believe that sexuality is our touch point to the spirituality.
And as you do this work around your sexuality, I've had to go through my own versions of it too because of traumatic experiences, woundings around not just the more big T traumas that I had around sex and sexuality, but some of the smaller, maybe seemingly less impactful things that still were impactful.
The word seemingly
Right.
is important.
Like rejections, hard breakups, these like
Stuffing of desires.
stuffing of desires is a big one for me. As any person starts to confront their own inner sexual repression, shame, guilt, shadow, you are going to be brought face to face with so many of the tendencies and patterns that you have that extend far beyond sex and sexuality in going into your head, coming out of your body, leaving your body, dissociating from your body, not listening to your body and its wisdom, and not being present in your body. And how many people have a sex life where they are completely running away in their heads and completely lost to the moment of the interaction with their partner.
Through fantasy, through porn,
Mm-hmm.
through whatever.
Yeah. And again, the solution to any of these running off into our heads things is coming back into the body and learning to not just go there, but to stay there, to live in that sense of presence where we are very attuned to ourselves. And that's what's possible through this work. That's what's possible. That's what's been made possible through dominance and submission for us.
Right.
Because the laws of polarity are going to tell us that this is going to be a different experience for you as a woman than it is for me as a man.
Yep.
It's not going to be the same. It's actually going to be opposite.
Which is what makes it so sexy
It
and filled with passion and desire, because it's not the same.
exactly. And even the process of coming back to this presence is going to be different.
Yeah.
So this is what we can live as a human experience, is this deep connection to our bodies, to our pleasure, to our sex, to our feeling, and just this wisdom that our bodies have when we listen to them, when we stop trying to think our way out of presence and come back home.
It's life giving beyond even just reproducing. Its sexual energy is life giving.
And so to wrap this up, I think the important note here is if someone is struggling with overthinking, they recognize I'm stuck in my head way too much. That is it's something that's calling to you, and you may just have not seen that the solution is not the same as doing more of the problem. Like, you can't think your way out of a thinking problem. You have to feel your way out of a thinking problem.
Amen to that.
And again, this is a part of what we help people with, helping them see these patterns in themselves.
It is seriously so rewarding to watch men and women like start to see themselves. And also, then, when they worked with us long enough, be able to reflect back to them, look where you were and look where you are now. It's, oh, it's one of my favorite things to get to do. And they're just like, ah, because when you're in this work, it's really easy to lose sight of like where you were, where you are now, because there's always more to go, it seems. But I have gotten to a point where I know I have more growth and expansion, but it just is like a natural part of life. I don't think about it, I don't dwell on it, I just live with this inner knowing of like, if there's something for me to see in my experience, I will. And like there I am again, like moving my hand. I'm just like dancing with life in a whole new way. Ah, John Michael Montgomery, Life's a Dance. I gotta listen to that song.
We went to 90s country on the Dom Subdevotion podcast.
I love older country.
Yeah, like this is exactly what it's about, because on one hand you recognize that there is no there. You're
Right.
like, this is not work that's ever done. But you can get to a point where you get so comfortable and attuned to your body that it actually feels worse to leave it than it does to come into it.
That is a very, very good point. I agree with that.
And that's where we want to help people get to, because that's presence, that's awareness, that's living in the moment and living in now, living in the truth. Like, all the books that have ever been written about this have all been trying to steer people to a place where they can just be present in the present moment. And we don't reach a place where we don't have more work to do. The true arrival is in being present, so present in your body that you actually enjoy being there, so that you can find your way through life listening to your own authentic inner wisdom. You can find your way through life by staying attuned to what is real and right for you, and then dealing with the shit that comes up. So, as always, we start out in one place, we end up in 10, and we have great conversation along the way. So thank you for showing up and being vulnerable and authentic here today.
My pleasure.